How's it going, everybody? Let's try that again. How's it going, everybody? Okay,
Good.
try to have a little energy. So, thanks for attending today. My name is Marc Nager. I am one of the co-founders of Startup Weekend. Took it over about 7 years ago, and when Startup Weekend was in about 32 cities, had 32 events, sorry, and ended up growing it. We've had almost 2,000 events now, and about almost 200,000 people that have gone through the programs. Just from Startup Weekend itself, really the mission has been solely about building communities. And so I wanted to take a little bit to talk to you first about 3 things. Number 1 is the fascinating evolution of what we've seen become what is the entrepreneurial industry over the last 6 or 7 years. Number 2, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about pre-accelerators, because I think that's a very hot topic, something really emerging right now in the world and the communities that we all live in. And number 3 is kind of what do we see in the future? And so first, going back to the evolution, I think the notion of startups isn't new, right? There's been entrepreneurs. The world has essentially been built by entrepreneurs. But what we've seen is this incredible movement. And I think Startup Weekend is just one of those things that came at a time starting right around 2006, 2007, when we experienced this incredible access to entrepreneurship that was never seen before, largely in part due to the internet. Things like the iPhone. The iPhone came out in 2007, right? So I think as the younger generations kind of found out and started hearing the things that, in the 90s started to die off, go work and climb the corporate ladder, right? Business schools, everybody started to challenge the notion of, is that really the right thing? Should I be working for myself? Should I be taking jobs? Or should I be helping create jobs? And I think our generation, the macro economy, has also put a lot of pressures on us to not only want to go become entrepreneurs, but to have no other choice. And I think that's one of the most inspiring things that we've seen starting, almost 10 years ago now. The world is just a different place. And becoming an entrepreneur went from being completely crazy, jumping off a cliff, to actually understanding the importance of what entrepreneurship really means for our economies. In the US, we like to use the statistic that all net job creation comes from companies less than 5 years old. That's a really powerful statistic. Another one is that between 2012 and 2025, 75% of the companies listed on the S&P 500 in the US, the 500 biggest companies in the US, between 2012 and 2025 will no longer be there, 75%. So we are seeing the world accelerate at speeds never seen before, and that acceleration is continuing to speed itself. And that is something that we as entrepreneurs are all very aware of. We're helping drive that. New technology, the access to entrepreneurship, and just the speed and rate of innovation, as that accelerates, so does the demand and the need for us to become entrepreneurs. We heard a little bit about from the opening speech, too. The demographics are changing as well, right? As people are retiring later, people are entering the job force earlier. You don't need an education, right? A lot of these different forces are actually putting a lot more pressure on the need for job creation. How are we going to create more jobs? Is it going to be through big companies? Or is it going to be from young companies? The answer is definitely startups. There's no question about that. We see that, we feel that, and a lot of you are actually doing that. And so I just wanted to make sure to highlight the importance around what all of us are doing, because creating a job for yourself is one of the most dignifying things you can ever do. What's more dignifying than that? Creating a job for your neighbor, creating jobs for people in your community, creating jobs around the world, because I think that's really at the core of what advances human welfare. I really believe entrepreneurship is something so global. I've been lucky enough to travel the world the last 7 or 8 years and see people starting businesses on every continent in almost 60 countries now. And people always ask, what's different? What's different in each of the countries about entrepreneurship? Does a startup weekend look actually very different? The answer is no. Aside from some different dialects, different accents, right? Maybe different skin color. But aside from that, entrepreneurship, it's a core set of values that we all hold. And I think it's something so human and so innate. We see problems, right, as humans, and we want to solve those problems. And I think that's what's driving this movement. And we're realizing that it's not an exclusive thing. You don't have to go pay to get a fancy education to have this right to be able to solve problems, right? It's something so basic. And so being able to actually celebrate entrepreneurship, celebrate starting companies, celebrate failing, right? Building this culture of entrepreneurship across the globe. And that makes me really feel, I have brothers and sisters around the world that view and see the world through a common set of eyes and a similar set of values. And I think that's a really special thing that's new to this generation. What's more is, I think we're starting to get more sophisticated about this whole entrepreneurship thing, right? We've, from things like Startup Weekend, we saw the emergence of accelerators. Accelerators went from, I think in 2006, there were like 1 or 2, right? And we've gone from 1 or 2 to literally thousands around the world of accelerators. And in that, we also have now, kind of as the industry is maturing, I'd like to say, we're starting to see things like pre-accelerators. We've realized that we've created an entire market. And one of the challenges we had, knowing Techstars really well and Y Combinator 500, we all have the same challenge at the accelerator level, is we only were able to accept 1 to 2% of the applicants. That means that we're turning away 98%, 99% of the qualified startups and entrepreneurs. And that's frustrating. We want to be able to serve as many entrepreneurs. Why? Because we really believe that the more entrepreneurs on this planet that we can help be successful, the faster we're going to grow, the better the world's going to be. That's a place I want to live in. That's a place I want my kids to live in. And I think that's a world we all want to create together. And so diving into pre-accelerators a little bit more. So one of the programs that I helped launch and create was actually called Startup Next. So after doing hundreds of startup weekends, the #1 question we always got was, what's next? We're not very smart, so I guess we created the brand Startup Next. It was just very logical. And I think that's actually very simple because it translated. It really plugged in quite easily. And so the Startup Next program, we took a very simple format, but 5-week pre-accelerator. And the goal is almost to help people discover what doesn't work about their startup more than it is to discover what's right or to really help the fundamentals of the business. And so the pre-accelerator is at the stage of you think you have a team, you think you have an idea, we're going to help you test that. And so much of it actually comes down to the human element, right? We know as co-founders, over 60% of startup failures, I think it's closer to like 80, over 60% of startup failures, we know statistically for a fact, fail because of human co-founder issues. Those human co-founder issues, how do you actually learn to work with a co-founder? Well, there's only one way to learn, and that's to actually work with them. So how can we create safe environments where you can actually learn those little nitpicky things that you love about your co-founder, that you hate about your co-founder, right? It's like dating. I really like to use the analogy of dating and challenge people to also think about it. Too many people get married after a one-night stand when it comes to entrepreneurship. They think they go into business with a brother or a cousin or a friend or something like that. Statistically, those are the companies and the co-founders that are least likely to succeed. The ones who have been working together for a much longer period, those are the ones who have a higher likelihood. So how can we create programs and overlay a methodology, help provide a taxonomy, a vocabulary, a common set of tools? And that's really what a pre-accelerator is about. Helping people, humans, teams come together, learn how to work with each other, use a common set of language, and be ready for the next step. So with Startup Next, we've actually had a great success positioning it as a pre-accelerator now. We're going to be expanding the program here. And I really want to talk, how many of you would be interested in applying to an accelerator? Okay, so some of the things that we're looking for, right? Ed talked a little about team, market, product. You can learn all that, and you can actually learn how to talk about those things, articulate those in a really valuable way in a matter of just a couple weeks. So a pre-accelerator is about helping you form a team. It is about helping you test and size a market. It is about helping you tell the story that sometimes makes a lot of sense to you, but doesn't make a lot of sense to the rest of the people around you. It is not about getting investment. Pre-accelerators are still quite early in the stage of startups, and the success rate from a pre-accelerator is still quite low. So as we think about pre-accelerators and the emergence of pre-accelerators, I believe that almost every single accelerator program is going to have some type of pre-accelerator attached to it. It just helps high-grade the quality. And I believe it helps people actually discover if going through an accelerator is right for them. One thing I truly believe is taking investment, going through an accelerator, it may not be the right path for every entrepreneur. And so as a founder, as an entrepreneur, I want you guys to also challenge and think to yourselves, is this the right thing for us? Right? Most accelerator programs are going to be mentor-driven, and of course you're going to get the investment capital. But really challenge and think, what is it that you need as an entrepreneur? What accelerator program or what other programs might exist in the market that can provide those things? Challenge the notion. Remember, you have to be entrepreneurial about your entrepreneurial journey. So think about the journey you're on and get creative. There's no 5 steps to creating a company. And so as you're on that journey, challenge yourself, challenge those around you. There's not just one answer, no matter what stage that you're at. And so I guess to kind of wrap up my thoughts, some of the things that I've seen, some of the things that I've learned, talking a little bit about the future. Of course, we're going to have pre-accelerators. We're going to have more accelerators. We're going to have, which will drive more investment funds, which will support more entrepreneurs around the world. But what do we kind of see that leading to? I think it's actually going to be moving towards entrepreneurship, accelerators, almost as challenging and a supplement to modern-day universities and education systems. I actually believe that as an entrepreneur, you can get a better education going through an accelerator program than you can going through 4 years of a master's program. Why? Because you're solving real-world problems with real people, real money, real stakes, right? And I think that's very, very different from working inside of the walls of a university. That's very safe. And it's not for everybody. Let's not forget that. Entrepreneurship isn't all rainbows and butterflies, right? It's probably one of the fucking hardest things you could ever do in your life as an individual. The hardest career path you could ever choose. So just remember that. But I do believe we're also going to start seeing the value of entrepreneurs. I think Ed brought up, is the value of somebody who's failed higher or lower? And so many of our social pressures, so much of our culture around the world has trained us to think if you fail that your value is less. I think we as a society are going to start to understand that the value, those lessons that you learn when you're trying to build a business, and you have to raise your hand and say, all right, I can't do it anymore, right? I took a risk and I failed, but I learned. I think we're going to start to value those learnings and start to take those learnings inside of corporations. We're going to see entrepreneurs and those who have tried to start businesses, their value in the markets start to go up. So the salaries that corporations are actually paying, the qualities you are looking for, when corporations are actually hiring, they're going to want to know what businesses you have tried to start, not just what you have been extremely successful for. So I think we as a society will actually treat entrepreneurs as a real asset class. One of the last things that I think we'll start to see is also treating startups, seeing them as a real asset class. So we're going to see more index funds, more syndicate funds. We're going to see investors really start to look at startup companies as legitimate investments as opposed to mutual funds. So we have a lot of wealthy individuals who may not know how to access startups. How can we free up some of that high-risk capital to flow more easily to entrepreneurs? We're going to see a lot more of that around the world. So I think with that, wanted to turn it over to Brett. And Brett's going to talk a little bit more. If you want, Ozan, did you want to jump in?
I just want to say I'll sign off on everything, and it's kind of a teaser to Amal's talk as well. We try to start building a revolution with all the entrepreneurial ecosystem players around the world. And the reason is there are not so many people focused on solving problems that are big in the world. Take it from agriculture, medical sector, construction, education, and the learnings, as Mark said, is going to be more important because you cannot be a successful entrepreneur, and there are of course exceptions, in your first trial. It's like you can't run a full marathon without training. So a lot of the people think this is only training and education, like courses and lectures. It's actually not. We're trying to give you enough tools, like a compass and a map, but we kick you out so you can find your way. A lot of you will be lost, and some of you will be eaten alive. That's okay. It's like collateral damage. But some will survive. I mean, you'll survive back, like the phoenix bird, and then you'll be really, really cool. And thank you so much. Ed, if you also want to join the team, and Brad, mic check. And I'll raise this up when you have like 5 minutes, in 5 minutes.
All right. Merhaba. My name is Brett Nakatsu. I'm the Director of Expansion at Techstars. I'd also like to clarify one thing. By expansion, my role is actually figuring out how to expand the Techstars community programs. So Ed talked a little bit about Up Global, Startup Weekend, Startup Next. So that's really my focus, is on the community building side. So I want to talk about two things that I've learned about community building during my time at Startup Weekend, and then Up Global, and now Techstars. The first thing is, I think at Up Global, we've done a really, really great job of leveraging global brands. So for those of you that don't know, Google for Entrepreneurs has played a huge role in helping us scale, accelerate our growth throughout the, not only MENA region, but globally. But one thing I have learned is that Startup Weekend, Startup Next, Startup Digest, the other Up programs, it's not a one-size-fits-all model. Every entrepreneur, every startup, every community is different, and they all are at different stages of their journey, right? So, Ed mentioned the merger of Techstars and Up Global, and I think, the main goal and the main vision of this merger is to provide support for startups and entrepreneurs and founders and communities at every stage, right? And to do this, we need to have multiple players in the ecosystem. I was having a conversation with Mark earlier today, and he gave a great analogy. You can't build a city with one skyscraper, right? You need to have multiple buildings. You need to have multiple skyscrapers. So having an ecosystem that's inclusive with, Ed also talked about, working with 500 startups and Y Combinator, and oftentimes we co-invest in those startups. Having a community that encourages collaboration like that is super, super important. Rather than having a community that sees other accelerators and other NGOs and other community leaders as competition, we should view them as complementary. And on a similar level, there's also programs like Lean Startup Machine. There's other hackathons. There's Startup Pirates. And in fact, a lot of our community leaders who run the programs that have helped us grow to such a massive scale also run those programs as well. And we encourage that because, like I said, the accumulation of all of those programs is what creates a sustainable and supportive startup ecosystem. So that's the first thing that I've learned from working closely with community leaders in the MENA region. So speaking of that, The second thing that I've also learned is Startup Weekend and Startup Next and Startup Week and the other programs, similar to the community building and the complementary efforts that I was mentioning before, we really need to rely on the people that are on the ground. We have the curriculum and we have the model that we think has worked, but there are tweaks that you need to make. And to curate the programs that we have, that's why we rely so heavily on these community leaders on the ground, because they're the ones that are interacting with the entrepreneurs. They're the ones that are meeting with the investors. They're the ones that know their ecosystem the best. So who are we to come in and say that you should do this, this, and this? So I really want to emphasize how important it is for us as an organization to have the community's support. And we really couldn't have grown to the scale that we are at today without the support of all of our community leaders. So for those of you in the audience who have run a Startup Weekend or a Startup Next, can you raise your hand? Let's give these guys a huge round of applause, because they're the ones that are really helping us drive this mission forward. And hopefully with the merger of Techstars and Up Global, we'll be able to provide, like I said, more support and a more comprehensive set of tools for entrepreneurs at every stage of their journey. So I'll end with that, and I'm going to hand the stage over to Ahmad, who's from Damascus, and he actually organized the first Startup Weekend in Damascus. I won't steal any of his thunder, but he's got quite an interesting story to tell, and it's very, very inspirational, and that's actually why we were so aggressive on bringing him on board and getting him involved in the Techstars network. So thank you guys for having me. It's been an awesome time in Istanbul, and teşekkürler.
Hi, welcome again to our Techstars room. It's really great to have you. My name is Ahmad, and I'm the regional manager of Techstars community program in the Middle East and Africa. I'll join you now to talk about unfamiliar topic and complicated topic for the Middle East, that is hope. Right. So, being from MENA region, and it's not the worst part. The worst part, what Brett said, I'm being from Syria. We really being frustrated most of the time about the things that's happening in the MENA region. We're being frustrated a lot about the really high unemployment rate, where 2 out of 4 women are not employed, 1 out of 4 male are not employed. That let us feel really disappointed and hopelessly waiting for opportunities. Opportunity for the government to reduce these numbers a little bit. Opportunity for big organizations to be able to put a job vacancy so we can do it, and waiting till we eventually end up with only 2 options. The first option is to give up, do nothing. It is what it is. This is the MENA. What you gonna do about it? And the other second option, that to create our own destiny by ourselves, not be waiting, by pursuing our dreams. For many entrepreneurs in the Middle East, doing a startup is not about navigating the risk to become a billionaire. It's not about wanting to do Ubering and do crazy idea. Starting a startup in the Middle East is literally one of the few options left for youth in order to create their own destiny, in order to restore the hope that we lost in the MENA and create the change that we always wanted to do. As a result of that, a lot of exciting things start to happen by youth, by inspiring entrepreneurs that wanted to do the change in the MENA. And they started to doing that with a lot of passion, a lot of hope in MENA. And they start to tell the whole world that entrepreneurs knows no war. When a group of people join together under the circumstances and chaos that are happening in Syria to just tell the whole world, like, we wanted to do a startup weekend event. We don't care about the war. This is not us. We want the future. We want the hope in the future. When other peoples, they said no to the political differences, when they joined together with their fellows from social entrepreneurs in Armenia and Turkey and built a startup weekend on the borders of Armenia to Turkey to put an end to that separate. When people in Iran, they said, the sanctions do not belong to us. We want the future. And they started to put together the biggest startup weekend event in the world with 500 university students happened in different universities in one weekend. And people, they wanted to say, women should be a part of this. Women not gonna sit and do nothing when there is change in MENA. And they organized Startup Weekend Women in Morocco for the North African countries. And they said there is no separate, there is no dysfunction between the Israeli and Palestinian. They organized a Startup Weekend, Palestinian and Israeli, where developers and coders from Israel joined fellows, entrepreneurs in Gaza. They wanted to support them and help them to do the event. All that great story is coming to happen, and we still have more and more, where we will have now sessions that I want you guys to welcome with me, the community leaders that have been behind all of this great work that we've been talking about, and my colleagues talked about on the stage, to just experience more with them what they are doing, what the challenges they face, what do they think they have.